Hello, my name is Ian and I'm from the Beaverton City Library. And let's all face it, 2020 was a no good, very bad, cursed year. We're all happy to bid at Bon Voyage, but that doesn't mean that there weren't some amazing books that came out this year for teens. And so I just wanted to put together a quick video to highlight a few of my favorites. And these are by no means all of the great books that came out. These are just some of my personal favorites that I think are must reads from 2020. This is Dragon Hoops by Gene Luen Yang, and this was actually one of my favorite graphic novels that came out in 2020, which is weird for me because I'm not really a sports fan. I don't follow basketball. It's just never really been my thing. And so I kind of put off reading this for a while. And when I finally did, I was kind of like how wrong I was because I really enjoyed this one. So Gene Yang approaches the story from the same sort of direction that I approached it from as a non-sports fan and a non-basketball fan. He's more of a comic fan and an illustrator and a graphic novelist. He's written things like Level Up, Boxers and Saints, American Born Chinese. He's done some Superman comics for DC. So he's a really accomplished cartoonist, but he just does not follow sports and doesn't have much interest in it. So when the high school that he teaches at, their basketball team has the chance to win this big tournament that they actually narrowly lost in the 1980s, he decides that he's going to try to tell the story. So it's both a history of the team and the tournament that they lost in the 1980s. He profiles some of the current players, but then he goes all the way back to the 19th century to talk about the history of the sport of basketball and the invention and the way that it overcame racism and segregation in the 20th century. So it's really more than just a blow-by-blow sports story. I absolutely love the artwork in it, and I love the way that the story kind of jumped around from the history of the sport to the present day to the history of this high school basketball team, and then also his own experience and struggles with writing the story as a non-sports fan. So Dragon Hoops by Gene Yang was by far easily in my top 5 graphic novels that came out in 2020. I highly recommend it. Punching the Air by E.B. Zeboy and Yusuf Salaam was another one of my top books that I read in 2020. This is another book in verse, and the story in this book kind of fits into the larger conversation that we're having in society about criminal justice reform and the inequality of punishments and the incarceration of minors and the prison industrial complex as a whole. So Yusuf Salaam, who is the co-author of this book, he was one of the Central Park Five, and he was 15 in the late 1980s when he was accused and wrongly convicted in the Central Park jogger case and incarcerated for a number of years over a crime that he had nothing to do. And he was exonerated later by DNA evidence. So this book, the incarceration aspect is kind of based on Yusuf's own experiences. And it's a fictionalized story about a teen who is an aspiring artist. He goes to a prestigious art school and he's looking forward to having a future in the arts, and he's just looking forward to life in general, really. And then one day he's hanging out with his friends in their neighborhood, and he gets into a fight with a group of white teenagers. And so they're all arrested and incarcerated, and then nothing happens to the white teenagers. And so this book is about him seeking justice and trying to make the inequalities in the system known. It's really beautifully written. It's in verse, so it's a pretty quick read, and it's also got some really great illustrations throughout. And just to give you guys a general feeling for it, so this is from one chapter in it. So this one's called The Thinker. I replay everybody's testimonies in my head like a song on a loop. Their words and what they thought to be their truth were like a scalpel, shaping me into the monster that they want me to be. I'm supposed to be like a statue in this courtroom, chiseled bronze, perfectly frozen in time, like some god stripped of his power or a fallen angel, cast into this hell. And every lie they say about me, every stone they throw at me, is supposed to bounce off like tiny pellets. Here, I have to be bulletproof. I love her use of language, and I love the way that a lot of the poems in this one kind of read like slam poetry or a hip hop song. And the book just never shies away from tackling these really important issues and adding to the conversation that we're having right now. So, Punching the Air by E.B. Zeboy and Yusuf Salaam. Clap When You Land by Elizabeth Acevedo was easily in my top 5 books for teens that I read that came out in 2020. This is her third book and her second book in verse. She also wrote The Poet X, which is another book in verse, and With the Fire on High. I highly recommend both of those books if you haven't read them yet. I think she's actually probably one of my favorite authors for teens currently, and this may be my favorite thing that she's written. So Clap When You Land deals with 2 teenage girls, one in New York City and one in the Dominican Republic. Unbeknownst to them, they're actually sisters who share the same father, only they don't know about each other because the dad spends most of the year in New York City and running a business. He runs a pool hall, but he also goes back to the Dominican Republic to visit the other half of his family during the summer. And so both of these girls don't know about each other. They don't know that they're sisters. And he's married to 2 different women, one in the United States and one in the Dominican Republic. And the 2 are thrown together when they suffer a horrible tragedy, and their dad dies coming back. He dies in a plane crash coming back from the Dominican Republic. And so the book is all about kind of looking at your family with warts and all, and learning how to use your family to move on from tragedy and cope, and that despite horrible, tragic situations, we can also find positivity and growth in them. So Clap When You Land by Elizabeth Acevedo. Her writing is amazing. It still reads kind of like slam poetry, and she's an accomplished slam poet herself, so you can look up some videos of her doing slam poetry on YouTube. Clap When You Land, one of my favorite books that came out in 2020.